Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another TosCast podcast. Tostoday here from the United States, and of course from Australia, IG, infinitely galactic. I thought tonight we would talk a little bit about Windows 8, how to possibly dual boot Windows 8 and Linux, and maybe a few tips on how to safely delete Ubuntu Linux as an example using Windows 8. But at this time, I would like to transfer the microphone to my good friend in Australia, infinitely galactic.
Okay, so Windows 8, interesting beast that it is obviously, what is proposed to be the next, follow-up to the wildly successful Windows 7, and it has received very mixed opinions throughout the tech universe. And some people love it, most people hate it, and for all intents and purposes, I'm just going to be sharing what my thoughts are on it. Now, just to give you a bit of background about the hardware that I'm running on, I've only run it really on one laptop, and that is my primary workhorse, a Dell XPS 15. There's no fancy touchscreen. It's just a standard keyboard and mouse, fairly nicely spec'd laptop. And I actually did the typical consumer thing, and that was upgrading from Windows 7 to Windows 8 completely over the internet, and just to see how that whole process would work. And to my surprise, actually, I just shelled out the $39 for the upgrade, and and surprisingly, it worked very nice. I didn't have any blue screens or any random crashes after upgrading from Windows 7, which was a lot different from the story that I had from upgrading from Vista to 7. But yes, Windows 8 upgraded very nicely. It transferred all of my settings and data across, no problem at all. And it was actually cooperating at the time with an Ubuntu 12.04 install and maybe another Linux distro in there as well. And it seemed to play fairly nice with them. Ubuntu's grub menu remained as the default bootloader, but then also the Windows EFI sort of thing would then pop up later if you chose to boot into Windows 8. It would then give you the option again to either choose Windows or Ubuntu from Windows 8's sort of UEFI colorful boot menu type thing. I'm not sure what the technical term is, so you'll
Yeah.
have to correct me in the comments. But the experience of Windows 8 in itself is interesting and paradoxical in many ways because of the fact you have this new modern touchscreen centric interface. It was Metro, now it's just, I think, modern, I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure.
Yeah.
And yeah, so you have that side of the OS and all of the apps in the Windows Store, and there's a lot tighter integration between your cloud accounts and your Windows services that you may or may not have been using, such as your Hotmail account or your SkyDrive or things like that.
Okay.
So from that, I mean, as an operating system, I don't mind using the modern interface just to muck around with if I'm wanting to just lazily catch up with some news or see what's on Twitter or just really basic lazy type computing. Anytime I want to get any serious work done, the modern UI just gets in the way.
Hmm.
And that is a bit of a drawback. Having said all of that, the when you do get the modern UI out of the way, Windows 8 in itself is actually a great deal faster than Windows 7 was. Performance-wise, it's I don't know, it's managed to trim a lot of the bloat
Wow.
that Windows 7 took with it. So it's definitely feel like they've cut the anchor somewhere,
Hmm.
and it feels a lot quicker, both boot speed, opening applications, and even from an upgrade. Even from an upgrade from Windows 7, it was still very quick. Incidentally, a few months later, I did end up just cleaning out the system and reinstalling Windows 8 as a clean install, and it was even faster.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
performance-wise, I really can't fault it. And there's a lot of those little lags that you would sometimes experience. For instance, if you wanted to safely remove a USB drive, for example, I know not many people do that, but hey, I
Yeah.
use external hard drives a fair bit, and I have
Okay.
had experience with corrupting them in the past. But anyway,
All
so
right.
that choosing that menu, for example, in Windows 7, you'd have to sit there for a bit, and it would eventually come up with your drives. Whereas now it's click bang, it all works the way it's supposed to. That's a very small, minute example, but still, there's just a lot of those little things here and there that you notice about the system
Okay.
that the performance has increased a lot.
So let me ask a question real quick, IJ. Then let me backtrack. I have a question for the newbies out there. A lot of, well, some people hate. Windows 8. I have it strictly in a virtual machine, and to me, it's fine. I mean, I chose not to upgrade from Windows 7 to Windows 8. The price was certainly fair, I thought, but you know what? I was completely satisfied with Windows 7 and running Windows 8 in a virtual machine. So my question to you is, on a scale of 1 to 10, I know you don't hate it, but do you absolutely love it, or is it somewhere in between?
I would say it was interesting because then after using Windows 8 for quite a period of time, about a month or two, I then went back to Windows 7 on a different machine. And I found Windows 7 more frustrating to use because of the fact I'd gotten used to the paradigm, at least
Huh,
on the keyboard, of just hitting the meta key, typing
right,
what you want to do,
right.
and then hitting enter, or at least having a nice, easy selection.
Ah,
And that combined with the speed of Windows 8, I did find it a bit frustrating to go back to Windows 7. So, I mean, now that the way that I'm working was kind of already transitioning towards a very keyboard-driven interface,
yes.
yeah, Windows 7 is like takes second place in my opinion.
Okay,
Um,
so maybe rate it like an 8 on a scale.
well, yeah, it's Windows after all, so it does
I
have its limitations.
I know. Okay, let's
I
be
would I
fair.
would
Give
I
it at
would
least
put it
yeah.
I would put it somewhere between probably a seven, probably
That
a 7 to 6.5, 7. Yeah.
okay. That's fair. So a couple things. It's definitely faster. It doesn't crash, and you find it more functional.
Functional once you adapt to it. At the start, it's a very awkward mess. You're throwing your mouse around on either corner and you just don't really know what it's supposed to do when you do those things.
Right.
Once you have keyboard shortcuts in your muscle memory, as it were,
Yes.
once you have a working knowledge of how all the multitasking working, because it is the most confusing system of multitasking on the planet. There is no
Yes.
denying that.
Yes.
But once you have figured out all those things, then it starts to work. And I can imagine, I mean, I still don't spend, I mean, I literally spend maybe 10%, 5 to 10% of my time in the modern UI. The rest of the time I'm on the desktop.
Okay.
But the time that I do spend on the desktop is actually pretty pleasant. So,
Okay. So you are somewhat pleasantly surprised that the learning curve isn't that bad, and probably the most important thing that it's stable. It works and and it does the way it was meant to be done. Meaning, I mean, I realize it was more designed for touchscreens, but for a desktop, once you get past the learning curve, what you're saying, it's not that bad, right?
correct. It's
Okay.
not, I mean, it's still a fairly good quality product in that it's well engineered. There's not bugs everywhere
Okay.
like there was with Vista. It's not a crying mess. As far as a user interface or a paradigm shift, it is a pretty steep learning curve, especially it depends on, what kind of
Right.
user you are,
Right.
how long you've been using computers and whether or not you have like the smartphone touchscreen tablet
Yes.
type mentality already baked in there. If you do, then it's probably not going to be too bad.
Okay.
But of course, if you've just been using Windows XP your whole life, then it's going to be a radical change in your, and you're just going to freak
Absolutely.
out.
Absolutely. Okay, one last thing before I go back to the newbie installation question. Did you choose to install any like start button, I mean like a extension. I believe one is called V-Start to give you that start menu back, or you really didn't need it?
No, I didn't need it.
Okay.
I just stuck with the default
Okay.
mod start menu simply because I love the keyboard launcher. That's
Cool.
really all there is.
Cool. All right. Um, let's see. Let me get this straight. So you upgraded from Windows 7 to Windows 8 and there were no flaws, right?
Correct. I was actually, I'm not sure if this is Windows' fault. I mean, ultimately it is, but
Yeah.
after about running 3 months with the upgrade version from Windows 7 to Windows 8, I may have got a virus or something and it started doing some weird stuff, including like I had a blue screen in there as well, which funnily enough is a bit more friendly than past blue screens. I'll add that. It
Okay.
puts a little frowny face and
Okay.
and makes you feel sorry for owning a Windows computer.
Funny
But
face. Okay. I didn't know that. Okay. Um,
But after reinstalling it and a clean install, which is just one of those things you end up doing with Windows machines anyway,
yeah.
it works very well, and
Okay.
I haven't had any sort of crashes or issues since.
Nice. Okay. Let's see. I'm trying to think like a newbie because I want to help out all the newbies out there. All right. So you updated the system, upgraded the system, no problem. Now you reinstalled Ubuntu 12.04 after the up.
Uh, no, Ubuntu 12.04 has been there the whole time. It's actually been the only distribution or operating system that's been on my computer now
Oh,
for, well, come April, almost a whole year.
so
So.
the upgrade did not affect the Linux partition of the hard drive of your laptop?
No, I didn't. I did actually, like, I went into when I was installing Windows 8 cleanly.
Ah,
From the upgrade, it only looks at the Windows 7 drive that you already have there and
ah,
just affects that one. But when I was clean installing it, which may or may not be what other people are doing,
yes.
you just go to advanced options. You choose the drive that you want to affect, like the C drive, D drive, etc.
Okay.
All the Linux drives do show up, but they don't have drive letters, so you just avoid them completely. And yes, once you've installed the system, generally speaking, it will overwrite grub, and then you can either use a third-party
Mm,
Windows bootloader modification tool to
okay.
add Ubuntu back in there as a Windows
Okay.
boot menu,
Okay.
um, which I believe there's a program out there called Easy BCD. I think
Yes.
you
I
might
was
have
gonna
to pay for it now with the latest version.
I was gonna get
But
to that. Yes. Yeah.
yes, and but then or you can do a little bit of Googling and reinstall or reinstate Grub as the default bootloader, which gives you access to both.
Okay, I actually have Easy BCD. I have one of the earlier free versions that seems to work at least up to Windows 7. Windows 8, I don't know.
I don't believe it does. I mean, it might,
Okay,
but
so it's up to
I didn't
okay.
have any much success with it.
Ah, all right. Now the question is, I do receive a question which I don't have an answer. IG, maybe you do. I believe it's someone named Johnny. Hi, Johnny. I believe the question was, now one of the videos I had uploaded last year, safely delete Ubuntu Linux, I believe inside Windows 7 using a free version of ECBCD. Now his question was, can you do this? Can you safely delete Linux inside Windows 8? I don't know. What do you say?
I've always seen it as a fairly easy issue of just using the disk management tool in Windows, which still exists in Windows 8.
Right?
You use this tool. I mean, I believe you access it by either finding a link to my computer and right-clicking it and
Yes.
clicking Manage, or you can just, well, obviously Windows 8 now, you just search for it, disk management,
Right.
and it'll give you a layout of your hard drive. You select the section of the hard drive that you are absolutely positively sure has
Right.
Ubuntu on it. You
Right.
need to make sure you get that part right. Then you right click, delete volume, and then you can either amalgamate it back with your old hard drive or you can just
Uh,
leave it as blank.
right.
Then all you have to do is reinsert your Windows install CD or your backup USB stick or whatever, and you need to reinstall Windows
Right.
bootloader
Okay,
as the default.
but here's the catch. What if that person forgot to create his Windows 8 backup CDs or just doesn't have one? And he does that, now he messes up his bootloader, the MBR, right?
Right, right. Then the catch would be I mean, there's a few ways around it. It depends how technical you want to get. You
Okay.
can shell out a bit of money to the Easy BCD guys, and they've got rescue CDs
Yes.
slash
Yes.
tools
Okay.
that can help you through that. Or you can also you can also just download a free Linux recovery tool and recover your MBR that way. It's a lot more technical. You would have to get your hands
Okay.
dirty a bit more, but
Okay.
it is possible.
Um, this is what I would do. I would probably cough up the few dollars for the latest version of VCBCD, which will handle Windows 8. And then before you delete the Linux partitions, basically, I would probably delete when you go to the disk management in Windows 8. Just off the top of my head, I believe I would delete anything that does not say NTFS and or recovery partition. if I'm not, because those are strictly Windows. But you can
Yes, that's
delete
correct.
everything else, which would probably be a
Yeah. Any
ext4.
any
Yeah,
any drive partitions that Windows does not recognize, and most of the time these are the Linux partitions like ext4. Anytime there's a drive there that you can see, it says it's a logical volume or there is a volume there, but it can't identify the file system. It can't identify what type of drive it is. Chances
right.
are that's a Linux drive, and therefore
Yes.
you can safely delete it.
Yes.
But you do need to make sure that if you had a home partition or you had a home folder
Yeah.
on a separate partition of the drive of Linux, then you need to make sure that you back up that stuff so that you don't
Yes.
unwittingly delete it.
Yes. Very, very good point. No matter what you do out there, newbies, whether you're running, Windows 7 or Windows 8 and dual booting Ubuntu or Linux Mint, back up first. And I'll say it again, back up your important stuff first just to be safe. Also, if you purchase a new computer, many new computers will allow you to create backup restore CDs. Create those. That's the first thing you ought to do. That's what I did. On my system, I believe it was on 3 or 4 DVDs, and that's my emergency backup. Let's see. Getting back to the ECBCD, this is how I would do it. Pay the few dollars for the ECBCD because it is easy. What I would probably do if it was me, if I wanted to delete, say, Ubuntu and Windows 8, I would boot up BCD, reload the Windows 8 MBR first. I believe that's the proper step still in Windows 8 as opposed to Windows 7, and then go back and delete the Linux partitions. And I believe that's it. Am I missing?
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
that's it. That's all there is to it.
That's how easy that is, and for that, it's definitely worth a few extra bucks versus, as IG said, getting your hands dirty, which definitely, in my opinion, would not be newbie friendly. Not impossible, but save yourself the headache. First, create your backup CDs or DVDs. Download ECBCD, the new version, which will handle Windows 8. Reload, or however you want to say it, reinstate the Windows 8 MBR, then delete the Linux partitions. And I think the last step, if you right click that empty volume, you want to extend the drive so that way you will have your full hard drive space back available for Windows 8, if I'm not mistaken. And then finally, you may want to defragment. I don't think I missed anything, IG. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, that sounds pretty comprehensive.
Okay, now the question is, you upgraded from an existing Windows 7 machine. What about the people out there? I know there are some that are having issues buying a new machine, and I believe on some of these machines you will not be allowed to dual boot. Is there a workaround?
To be honest, I'm not entirely sure. I mean, in my opinion, it's kind of looking like the way that it's been on Macs for quite some time, in that Apple computers they don't allow you to officially dual boot much at all because of the fact they have a locked bootloader and one thing and the other.
Okay,
So, I mean, I believe now that Windows 8 PCs have that UEFI thing
right,
happening.
right.
It depends what distribution you choose. I know a lot of the latest ones like Fedora 18, OpenSUSE 12.3,
Okay,
or Ubuntu 12.10, they all have, I believe they all have compatibility with UEFI.
okay,
So, and they do, so for instance, the Windows UEFI bootloader will pick it up. I'm not entirely sure about the actual step-by-step process, though, of how
okay.
you would go about dual booting those two.
So I guess the best answer that we can give you, listeners, is as far as dual booting with a new machine. I guess the best answer that we can give you is maybe. Some of the new machines, I believe there might be a setting in the BIOS to turn that on or off, if I am not mistaken. I can't guarantee you that, of course. And then, as IG said, some of the newer Linux releases are compatible with the UEFI. You know what? I'm thinking to myself, I have a feeling it may be a problem now, but maybe much less of a problem, say 6 months from now, possibly.
Oh, absolutely. Nearly
Yeah,
everybody will support it, and it'll just be another
right.
one of those
It's just a
speed
matter
bumps
of
that we
time.
all thought was a storm in a teacup.
It's yeah, it'd be like it's just a matter of time. So, if you currently have, but I believe $39.99 special expired, and I believe it's either $100 or $200 to upgrade, and I think that's a bit much, personally.
I would not have paid $100 or $200 for Windows 8, point blank. I just would not have done it, and that's why I
Okay,
bought it when I did. So
so
I don't mind paying $40 for it because, in my opinion, the
it was
performance
worth it.
increases and the other little things, it makes it worth it, but not 100,
Okay,
$200. Absolutely not.
okay, so I
If
guess
you're happy with Windows 7 and you don't feel like shelling out hundreds of dollars, then yeah, I'd say stick with Windows 7. You're
that
not missing out on $100 to $200 worth of
yeah,
value.
I would just take those $200 and just buy a new machine if you need one.
Buy a
Um,
Chromebook.
or even a Chromebook. Yeah, I mean, if right, if all you want to do is get on the web and that's it, those are perfect. I believe one of the laptops is one of the Chromebooks is one of the best-selling laptops on Amazon. But if you're looking for a fully functioning desktop to do multimedia stuff with the hard drive and all that, if yeah, I mean, look, if I needed a new machine, I would have no problem buying a new Windows 8 desktop. um, I would be maybe disappointed if I couldn't install Ubuntu immediately, but I have a feeling, like we said, down the line, eventually it's going to work. But as far as shelling out 100 or 200 US dollars to upgrade from Windows 7 to Windows 8, unless you really got to have the latest version, we are advising you to don't do that and just buy a new machine if you need one.
The
Um,
other solution, the other solution is to do away with Windows altogether. As long as you have a system backup tool, then install Zorin, Linux, Mint, Ubuntu,
yeah.
and just plop Windows 8 as a virtual machine on that computer, and you'd
That
be set.
that's what I do. I have it strictly as a virtual machine. I enjoy tinkering with it, but one of these days, who knows? I may just buy a new machine because IG, when you said Windows 8 is noticeably faster, just look at that because there's so much stuff on it. You would think it'd be slower, but you are saying it is not, and that surprises me somewhat. But
Hmm.
that's good news, actually. Yeah.
I
So
think it was the Windows, the story of Windows has done a bit of an arc in that it started out, Windows XP was a very light system. Windows Vista was a heck of a lot heavier. Windows 7 was about the same, but slightly heavier, especially as time went on with service packs, etc.
yeah,
And now I kind of feel like the arc is going back the other way because of the fact computers, they're trying to make them compatible with a lot more mobile devices, therefore
right.
not as much processing power. They're trying to make them sort of as trim but as functional as possible because of this whole mobile resurgence of tablets and very
Okay,
light, thin computers. So at least that's my 2 cents worth on the reason why they're
right.
making it faster.
Okay. Well, I think that's it as far as the tips for the newbies out there. I guess in conclusion, if you are happy with Windows 7, don't upgrade. If you want the latest and greatest, I would just spend the upgrade money and just buy a new machine. If it was me, that's what I would do. And then if you cannot immediately dual boot your favorite version of Linux, wait, as we say, as the months go by and the updated versions, I'm sure will have more compatibility or less compatibility issues than there are now. I mean, things change with time. So,
And
um,
even if you are considering getting a new computer, just do a bit of research beforehand. Just Google up just to see, how locked down the bootloader is, because chances are most people, at least with very popular computers, either, from Dell or HP, most people
yes.
have figured out how to get around it, I would say, because the community is just that awesome.
Right, or it may be simple as a BIOS. I mean, I call it a switch, but like an on-off, you can just shut that on or off and install what you want to. I mean, I don't
Right.
know, but probably yes. If you go to the manufacturer's website, that feature may be there, and if it has that feature, that is what you are looking for as a newbie, a simple on and off switch for the UEFI. So that way you can definitely dual boot your favorite operating system. I recommend your favorite Linux operating system. I recommend something with the automatic graphical installer, such as the one that me and IG use, 12.0 for Ubuntu. Of course, Linux Mint and Zorin will work also. But as I said, even if it's an easy install, backup everything in Windows just to be safe. I I haven't had an issue in a long, long time in terms of installing as a dual boot, but you just never know. But if you buy a new machine, I would create the backup disks first, just in case. And if something breaks, at least you have those disks and you are good to go to reinstall Windows 8.
Back up first, ask questions later, so if it all hits the fan, you've still, got your system intact.
Right, not the reverse, because if you install and breaks and you're like, oh, why didn't I create the backup CD? I mean, it's a real pain, and you know what? So backup first, and you should be okay as far as the installation goes.
I'd have to say my summarizing thought for Windows 8 would actually be similar to your opinion or to your thoughts on UEFI.
Yeah,
If Windows 8 came with a simple on-off switch for the modern I think that would save a lot of headaches for a
yes,
lot of users. The
yes,
fact that they didn't, they're obviously pushing the market in a certain direction.
yes.
They may or may not succeed with that, but we shall see.
Of course, this begs the question, are they going to simplify it in Windows 9? I mean,
Yeah, well, I really hope that they don't just push the modern UI as
yeah.
the only option because I think that would be the end of all productivity.
Um, yeah. For me, as a dual booter, I think the biggest mistake that Windows 8 developers did is not to leave in there the Windows 7 start or button, like, menu, whatever you want to call it. At least the customer could just hit the super key and toggle back and forth immediately, and then with the customer's own comfortable pace get acclimated to the modern UI, as they still had the option to just click the Windows 7 start orb, if that makes any sense. That would be a little bit less traumatic for the customer. At least
Right,
that's how I
right.
see it. But they chose not to do that. They're forcing it on you. Now, as IG said, it's not, it's not that bad, but it is a learning curve. Um, for myself, I was happy with Windows 7 dual booting, so I'm sticking with that. But IG, that's what I have on Windows 8. Do you have any closing comments?
No, apart from, gosh, I wish it had an on-off switch.
Boy, you know what? The old adage remains, the KISS method. Keep it simple, stupid. So to all the developers out there, both Linux and Windows and Android and Chrome OS, you know what? There's nothing wrong with being simple. Simple does not equal old and outdated. Simple simply means simple, and that's not necessarily a bad word. And I will leave it at that. IG, thank you so much for joining me again. It's been a pleasure. Hopefully, I will hopefully have all three of us, me, you, and Twill, this week in Linux together. Maybe next week. We shall see. It's been a while. Maybe as a Linux A team or something like that, and go further into the discussions about technology for newbies and for everybody. But at this time, I am signing off from the USA and from Australia.
Yes, thank you all for listening, watching, commenting, and subscribing to both Total OS Today's channel, my channel, and Twill's channel once he comes around. And look, it's an interesting marketplace to watch, and that's probably one of my favorite things about it is just that there is change, and when change happens, people get angry, and yeah, it's good fun to watch.
Yeah, yeah. Don't get angry. It's okay to get frustrated, I suppose, but don't get angry. Stay level-headed. Keep the peace, and who knows, you may learn something that you never knew existed before. Thank you.
Keep calm and install
Yes.
Ubuntu.
Yes. Well, at least 12.04. That's a long-term support release. It's stable. We like it. So if you want to try it, absolutely. IG, thank you so much. And to all the listeners out there, we will catch all of you sometime in your dual booting future. Bye bye.